I was born on February 15th, 1820. I died on March 13th, 1906. I was famous for women's rights, women's suffrage. I was important because I fought for women's rights. I died of pneumonia and heart failure. My best friend was Elizabeth Cady Stanton, who became my lifelong friend and co-worker in social reform.
My name is Henry Ford. You might recognize my name. I am the founder of the Ford Motor Company. My parents, I, a little after I opened Ford Motor Company, I, I made the most famous car ever, the Model T. My parents were William and Mary Ford. I had 5 siblings. I was born in Dearborn, Michigan, July 30th, 1863. I've always loved mechanics. I taught myself to repair watches, and sometimes I worked on my classmates' watches while in class. I wasn't really supposed to, but nothing prepared me for what I saw in 1896 on a dirt road in Michigan. I saw a farmer using a self-powered road engine, and I had never seen anything like this. I scrambled off our wagon and asked the farmer questions. From then on, I knew I'd dedicate my life to building self-powered vehicles. One of my first jobs was the Edison Illumination Company. While working there, I met my mentor, Thomas Edison. While working there, I had time to develop a new engine I used in my first car, the quadricycle, in 1896. I was still in 1903, I founded the Ford Motor Company and introduced the Model A car. This car was well made and simple to operate. I was still convinced I could build a better, cheaper, and easier to build and drive and repair car. So in 1908, I created the most famous car ever, the Model T. It was larger and sat higher off the road, so it could ride up and down out of bumps and up and down out of holes and bumps, and it was affordable for the average person. It was so popular, it sold more than all cars combined in the U.S. in 1912. Then I developed a new way to build cars called the assembly line. This helped make a 12-hour job now only 90 minutes. World War II had just begun in 1939, and we started manufacturing warplanes and jeeps. I changed transport forever by making cars affordable and better and easier. I died on April 7th, 1947.
I, Emma Goldman, was an activist, writer, and speaker. That means I took action to make changes. I also used writing to help make changes for women's rights. I, Emma Goldman, was also an anarchist. I fought for freedom of thought, speech, love, and religion. I, Emma Goldman, was born in Russia in 1869. I moved to America when I was 15. That's when I became an activist and began talking to thousands of people about women's rights and social issues. My ideas even got me kicked out of America 34 years after I got there. Activists like me helped change laws like birth control and safe workplaces. I also helped free speech. I was in jail several times for being an activist. I also went to jail for speaking and writing down my ideas. I wanted true freedom for men and women. I spent my whole life fighting for social issues and traveled to many countries to give speeches when I was in my 60s. I, Emma Goldman, got the nickname a dangerous woman because many people thought my ideas were extreme. A lot of the people didn't want my ideas to change how things already were. I died on May 14, 1940, when I was 70 years old. I'm now viewed as a great historical speaker and activist. I had a large role in the feminist and anarchist movement and will not be soon forgotten. Well, these are some of the things that she fought for: free speech, free thought, free love, and then the most violent element in society is ignorance. When we can't dream any longer, we die. I'd rather have roses on my table than diamonds on my neck. If voting changed anything, they'd make it illegal.
Early life. Jesse Owens was born in 1913, and he grew up in Alabama. He was the youngest of 13 children. His family were sharecroppers, and he had a 3-room house.
Get closer.
He was walking to church and then said, "I want to go to college," but no one at that time had gone, or no one in his family had gone. He and his family picked 100 pounds of cotton a day, but then boll weevils started messing up the crops, and then the Great Migration started. Then he moved to Cleveland, Ohio. College. Columbus, Ohio. 100 out of 15,000 students were Black, and they were segregated.
Mm-hmm.
Jesse Owens was the first Black person to be captain of
Look here. Track
and field. Larry Snyder was his coach. His school was in the Big Ten. He won the 100-yard dash, the 220-yard race, and the long jump. He tied and set 4 world records at Ferry Field. World records. 1933, the 100-yard dash. 1935, the 100-yard dash, 9.4 seconds. 1935, long jump, 26 feet.
8 1/4 inch.
8 1/4 inch. 1935, 220-yard dash, 20.3 seconds. 1935, 220-yard low hurdles, 22.6 seconds. 1936, 200-meter dash, 20.7 seconds. 1936,
4 by 100.
4 by 100 meter relay, 39.8 seconds.
Talk about going to New York City and trying out for the Olympics.
He went to New York City in 1936 to try out for the Olympics. In 1936, he made it to the Germany Olympics. And that was one part that happened.
It was a big deal. Why?
Oh, no. Adolf, how do you say? Adolf Hitler, Germany, was the Germany leader. Many called to boycott to NAACP. He showed what a black athlete could accomplish. He voted to attend, but didn't support Nazis, and sailed to Germany. The competition was grand, and I'm glad to come out on the top. Jesse Owen. First time torch was carried city to city. August 3rd, 1936, 100-meter dash. First gold medal. White humanity should be ashamed of itself. Joseph.
It's one of the top Nazi officials.
Goebbels is one of the top Nazi officials. Les Long is a competitor. Great sportsmanship. 4 to 100-meter relay. He played in the 4 to 100-meter relay. I decided I wasn't going to come down. I was going to fly. I was going to stay up in the air forever. When I said he and his family picked 100 pounds of cotton a day, this is that.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where he big college.
Uh-huh. Are you wearing like the Ohio State shirt?
Yeah.
You sure are.
And then he went to the Germany Olympics. So there's this right here.
Mm-hmm.
So world records goes on this little this red note. And this is for the Olympics.
Hi, my name is Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I was born in Harlem, New York City on April 16, 1947. My name was Ferdinand Lewis Osinder Jr. I was always really tall for my age, and I was in fourth grade. I was already 5 feet 9 inches. Even though I'm known as one of the best basketball players now, I wasn't always good at basketball. Actually, in elementary school, I was bullied a lot and faced a lot of racism, and people called me mean names. By 7th grade, I started getting better at basketball and would practice my famous skyhook shot. In 8th grade, I was 6 feet 8 inches and could dunk a basketball. Become a record-breaking basketball player. After high school, I attended the University of California in Los Angeles. I won many awards in college for all my basketball achievements. For example, I was named Player of the Year in 1967 and 1969. In my junior year, I scratched my eye in a game which would happen again, so I started wearing goggles. I was influenced by Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, and Muhammad Ali and the Civil Rights Movement. In 1968, I became Muslim and changed my name to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. In the summer of 1968, I boycotted the Olympics U.S. men's basketball team as a protest against the unjust treatment of African Americans. After graduation in the 1969 NBA draft, the Milwaukee Bucks picked me. In the 1970-71 NBA season, me and my team won the NBA championship. In 1975, I went to play for the LA Lakers from 1975 to 1989. By the end of my NBA career, I became the NBA's all-time leading scorer with 38,387 points and won 6 MVP awards. I won 6 championships. After my NBA career, I became a best-selling author. I try to bring awareness about issues with racism and religion. I was inducted into the NBA Hall of Fame. I was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom by President Obama in 2016. So you can see from my life that even if you don't start off being great at something, with determination and discipline, you can do anything, no matter what anyone tells you.
When I was 12, I was kidnapped and brought to North Dakota. When I was 15, I was sold to a fur trader from France and became his wife. In 1804, Lewis and Clark were sent to explore the land the United States bought from France. When Lewis and Clark stopped in North Dakota, they needed someone to speak to the Shoshone tribe to buy horses. My husband told them that I was Shoshone, and Lewis and Clark paid us $500 to go on the expedition. I was pregnant with my first baby. 1805, I had my first baby. His name was Jean-Baptiste Charbonneau. I made the journey with him on my back. I was valuable on the trip because I was a hard worker. I found edible plants. I knew native languages and represented peace to tribes. Clark called me Janie in a baby pump. 5 years after being kidnapped, I finally headed home on the Missouri River. May 14th, 1805, on a very foggy day, a gust of wind upset our boats and it filled with water. Lewis and Clark's supplies floated away. I saved them and saved the expedition. To honor me, they named a river after me in Montana. The journey was very hard. People got very sick and there were lots of storms. But after months, we finally found the Shoshone tribe. I was reunited with my best friend and my brother, who is now the chief. His name is Kamiyoe. I helped arrange trades for horses for the expedition. They needed horses to cross the Bitterroot Mountains. I was tempted to stay with my tribe, but I felt loyal to Lewis and Clark, so I decided to stay on the expedition. I overheard my brother saying he would break his promise about the horses. I told my husband, who told Lewis and Clark, and then he told Kamiyoe, who was ashamed and kept his promise. The trip over the mountains was very hard. We had to trade for food and even eat dogs and horses. The tribes we met were nice to us because they felt more comfortable with the woman and the baby. In November 1805, we finally reached the Pacific Ocean. We had traveled 2,200 miles. We set up a fort called Fort Clatsop for the winter in Oregon. After 3 months, we journeyed home. Once again, I saved the expedition by gathering food, making medicine, and showing the best way through the mountains. When we arrived back, Lewis and Clark paid my husband $500. After the expedition, we went to St. Louis and bought a farm from Clark. Eventually, my husband took me on a fur trading trip. My son stayed in St. Louis with Clark. I died at age 25 after having a baby girl named Lizette. Clark raised both of my children. I was honored for my help and saving the Lewis and Clark expedition. It couldn't have happened without me. There are mountains named after me in Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, and Oregon. In the year 2000, they put my face on a $1 golden coin and honored me. Sacagawea.
I'm Orville Wright. I invented the airplane. I was born in 1871 in Dayton, Ohio. My parents were Milton and Susan. I had 3 brothers and 1 sister. One of my brothers is Wilbur. He helped invent and build the first airplane with me. My dad, Milton, gave my brother and me a toy helicopter. I really like the helicopter. We tried to build a bigger version. In 1889, I was in high school. I published my own newspaper. It is called the West Side News. My brother joined the West Side News as the editor. I also made several different types of bicycles. We started fixing bicycles in our printing shop. We realized we had a new business. We opened a bicycle shop called the Right Cycle Exchange. We made and fixed bicycles. I got a typhoid fever in 1896. Wilbur took care of me when I was sick. In the end of the 1800s, lots of people were trying to make gliders that could fly far and for a decent amount of time. Wilbur and I studied failed attempts. We decided to build an aircraft that we needed to solve 3 problems. Make an engine that would be able to push the thing forward. Make wings that would be able to lift it. And control the machine once it was in the air. The hardest problem was controlling the plane in the air. We created handlebars like a bicycle to control the wings and tail. The second hardest problem was we made we had to have wings that weren't too much metal and mostly fabric. The easiest problem was we had an engine. We needed one. Building the aircraft took a year. In 1900, we tested our glider at Kitty Hawk for 3 years every winter. We were trying to figure out how to control the glider. December 17th, 1903. The Wright Flyer was ready. I had the first successful engine-powered flight. It lasted 12 seconds and flew 120 feet. But the steering was controlled. And I landed safely. We made 3 more flights that day. The longest was 59 seconds and flew 850 feet. But the plane crashed and was in pieces. Sadly, we had to rebuild it. Over the next 2 years, we improved and made new versions of the Wright Flyer. In 1905, this is crazy, I made a flight of nearly an hour. But then Wilbur and I stopped flying for 3 years so no one would steal our idea. We tried selling the idea to the military, but they thought we were crazy. In 1908, we went back to Kitty Hawk and the reporters caught me flying and reported it. In August 8, 1908 in Paris, even though Wilbur had been flying for 5 years, the world didn't believe Wilbur and I until we were filmed in 1908, August 8th in Paris. My brother and I became famous. We entered flying competitions and did exhibitions. The U.S. Army gave us contracts to build airplanes and train pilots. Sadly, my brother became sick and died on May 30th, 1912 at 45 years old. In 1915, I sold my position at the Wright Company for $1 million. That's a crazy amount of money today. And retired. I died after 2 heart attacks at the age of 76 years old. The end. And cookies. This is my little model of the Wright Flyer.
I was a descendant of one of Alexander's the Great generals. I was born 69 BC in the Egyptian capital city Alexandria, but my family was Greek. Not sure who my mother was. My father was King Ptolemy XII. I did not go to school. I had a private tutor, and I was very smart. I spoke many languages and was the only Ptolemy ruler who could speak Egypt. My father, King Ptolemy XII, was not a good king due to his greediness. The people complained, so he fled to Rome and leaving his children. So his second daughter was the new ruler. For 3 years she was gone. He came back and was the ruler with the help of the Rome army for 4 years. When he died, he made me the queen. I married my older brother. He was 9 and I was 18. We did not get along. I was queen when I was 18. Once I was queen, I was determined to make Egypt a great nation. However, young Ptolemy XIII advisors tried to attack me whenever they could. I was forced out of Egypt and fled to Shihirat and got gathered an army of my own supporters and planned to fight my way back into Egypt, regain power. A man named Caesar fell in love with me, but Ptolemy's armies attacked the place where me and Caesar lived. After 6 months of attacking, Caesar had enough. He defeated the Ptolemy's army and near the bank of the Nile River. King Ptolemy XIII tried to escape by jumping into a boat, but the boat was rocked too much and he fell into the river. He drowned quickly due to his gold armors weighing him down. He was 15 when it happened. When I died was August 30 BC because of the acid of an Egyptian snake that bit me. But it was suicide because I killed myself because I thought it was better than being a slave after we lost to Rome in a battle.
My name is Joanne Rowling. You probably know me as J.K. Rowling, the creator of the Harry Potter series. I was born at Yale Hospital on July 31st, 1965. 2 years later, I had a sister named Deanna. When I was 15, my mom got sick. She had MS. In my last year at college, I went to Paris. In 1990, my mom died. After my mom died, I moved to Portugal. There, I met a journalist named Jorge. In 1992, we got married. In 1997, I got the first book in the Harry Potter series published. When I finished the fifth in the series, I had over $1 billion. I was richer than the Queen. The people who starred in the Harry Potter movies are Daniel Radcliffe, who played Harry Potter, Emma Watson, who played Hermione Granger, and Rupert Grint, who played Ron Weasley. I worked with and-supported charities like Gingerbread, which helps one-parent families, and the National MS Society. There are some stories behind the characters from other words, like the Weasley family is named after my favorite animal, the weasel, and Fenrir Greyback is named after a Norse wolf god. Sirius Black is named after a dog star, which is very fitting for a man who turns into a dog. And Peeves the Poltergeist is living up to his name because Peeves means to irritate. All in all, there were 7 Harry Potter books: The Sorcerer's Stone, The Chamber of Secrets, The Prisoner of Azkaban, The Goblet of Fire, The Order of the Phoenix, The Half-Blood Prince, and The Deathly Hallows.
Hello, I am Jeff Kinney. I was born on February 19th, 1971 in Upper Marlboro, Maryland. I was a big baby at 10 pounds, and there was nothing wimpy about me. I was third of 4 kids and was a good big brother telling jokes and stories. Our family shared a love for comics. Some of my favorite books were Judy Blume because she used humor to describe real life. My favorite subject in school was art. I had lots of friends as a kid, but was more of an observer than a participant. In middle school, I got better and better at art, so good that my teacher wanted to display my drawings in the lobby. I enjoyed school, and I got such good grades that I graduated third in my class. In my senior year, I had to decide which college to attend. I had lots of choices, but college is expensive, so I took a full scholarship to Villanova University. I was the campus cartoonist and loved it, but I realized I wasn't cut out for college. Instead, I wanted a job where I could make people be creative and make people laugh, so I decided to give up my scholarship. I received a call from a paper called The Diamondback. They picked up my comic Igdoof, and it was an immediate hit. It was so popular that other colleges put it in their newspapers. Being a popular cartoonist was a dream come true, and I wanted a future in cartooning. I started writing letters to professional cartoonists for advice. I was a big fan of the book Big Nate by Lincoln Pierce, and he liked my work and gave me lots of tips. I enjoyed the attention that came from having a popular cartoon. I began to mail samples of my work to every cartoon syndicate in the country. After all the comics I sent out, no one was interested. They said my drawings did not look professional, but I turned rejection into a big idea. I thought of a book like a journal from a kid's point of view, and I would call it Diary of a Wimpy Kid. Over the next 4 years, I filled a notebook with stories and ideas for the book. Every day I went to my basement to write. In 2006, I went to my first Comic-Con, and they barely let me in the doors. Once in, no one was interested in my work. As I was about to leave, I showed one last publisher my book, and after 30 seconds, my life and work changed forever. Next, I met with the publishing company Abrams. They loved my work, but had a different idea. I had been writing one big book for adults. They wanted a book series for kids. In 2007, Diary of a Wimpy Kid was released. I was nervous, and it was off to a slow start. Only family and friends showed up to my first event. But things changed quickly. Everyone was buying the book. It made all the way to the New York Times bestseller list. Many kids were learning that reading could be fun. I still saw myself as a failed cartoonist, but the work never stopped for me. I say anything worth having is worth working for.
Okay. Good morning. My name is Jackie Robinson, and I'm the first Black player to play in Major League Baseball and the first Black player to be voted into its Hall of Fame. I was born in the small town of Cairo, Georgia on January 31st, 1919. I was the youngest of 5 siblings. My grandparents were slaves. My parents were sharecroppers. When I was 16 months old, my family moved from Georgia to Pasadena, California. During my childhood and college years at UCLA, I excelled in sports such as basketball, football, golf, and tennis. Before graduating from college, I left to try to make money, and instead I was drafted into the U.S. Army. After serving in the Army for a few years, I joined an all-Black baseball team called the Kansas City Monarchs. We only played other all-Black teams in what was called the Negro Leagues. In 1945, Branch Rickey, the president of the Brooklyn Dodgers, signed me to play for their minor league team, the Montreal Royals. In my first game, I hit a 3-run homer, and the team won 14-1. I led my team all the way to the minor league championship. We lost the first 3 games in the 7-game series. But in Game 4, I scored the tying run that made the game go into extra innings. We ended up winning that game and the remaining games to win the series. Soon after, I had a son named Jackie Jr. Then on April 10th, 1947, I was promoted up to the Brooklyn Dodgers, making me the first Black player to ever play for the major leagues. The baseball league had no Black baseball players for the past 50 years. In the beginning of the season, the other white team players shouted mean things at me. But as the season continued, I got more support by teammates and fans. That season, we made it to the World Series, but lost to the Yankees in the final 7th game. Once the season was over, every teammate came to my locker to say goodbye. That made me feel good and that I finally fit in. In 1949, I had my best season and was named MVP and led the league in hitting and stolen bases. And in 1955, the Brooklyn Dodgers won their first World Series. I retired the next year and then focused on the civil rights movement with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I started a company to build houses for poor families and was also the first Black TV analyst for Major League Baseball. I threw out the first pitch of the World Series on October 15, 1972, which was the 25th anniversary of when I broke the color barrier. 9 days later, I died at home at age 53. After my death, I was voted into the Major League Hall of Fame and received the Presidential Medal of Freedom. 50 years after I broke the color barrier, my number 42 was retired from both the National and American leagues. Because of my contributions to America, every April 15th is now called Jackie Robinson Day in my honor. Thank you.
I am known as Genghis Khan, the leader of the world's largest empire. I was born in 1165, in the year of a horse. My given name at birth was Temujin. My father was a minor lord of the Mongolian steppe, giving me noble blood. My father was killed by a rival tribe in 1174, and I was 9 years old. I married my wife, Dorte, when I was 18 years old. She bears me 4 sons who all go on to be great Khans themselves. I spend the next 14 years uniting the Mongol tribes into a fighting force. In 1196, when I was 32 years old, my people and I set off to conquer our neighbors, the Tartars. My people loved and adored me as I shared the wealth with them, not keeping it to myself as other Khans would. My armies move out in all directions, east, west, north, south. All people could either join my empire or succumb to my sword. In 1206, I am proclaimed Genghis Khan, meaning universal ruler. In my lifetime, I controlled all lands between China and Persia. I died in 1227, the year of Ram. No one is sure what I died from. Some say it was an infection from a hunting accident. Others say I was poisoned by a spy. My greatest accomplishments are control from a large central government, a written language as they had none, and I chose for them the religion of Buddhism as I thought it was best.
Hi, I am Jane Goodall. I was born on April 3rd, 1934 in London, England. My dad gave me a stuffed chimp that when I was 1 year old. I named her Jubilee. I loved exploring outdoors and nature. I loved animals. At 5, I wanted to see how chickens laid eggs. After waiting 5 hours, an egg popped out under the chicken. My mother, Vane, wrote novels. My father, Mortimer, was an engineer. On my 4th birthday, my sister Judy was born. During World War II, I moved to my grandma's in Bournemouth with my mom and sister. I loved reading books about animals. I graduated from high school, but there wasn't enough money for college. I got a letter from my old friend about going to Kenya, Africa. I accepted. I got to Kenya, Africa on my birthday, April 3rd, 1957. I got to have a meeting with the famous scientist Louis Leakey. I worked as Leakey's secretary at a museum in Nairobi. He also let me dig for fossils. Leakey was interested in chimps because he felt they had much in common with humans. He felt I was right for the job. I became a primatologist, which means I studied chimpanzees. I started living at Nome Stream at a camp and my mother came too for the first 4 months. There was 2 scouts that helped me. I would stay overnight out in the forest to study the chips. I was afraid of leopards. My mother and I got malaria and stayed in the tent for 2 weeks. We recovered. I named the chimps Flo, Fifi, Vegan, and Fabian. They all had different personalities. My favorite was David Greybeard. His eyes are beautiful. He was calm and not afraid of me. In August 1963, there was an article about me called My Life Among Wild Chimpanzees. Then Hugo, who worked for the National Geographic, did the photos. After that, Lewis helped to get me admitted to Cambridge University, and I completed a doctorate for working with the chimps. Hugo and I fell in love and got married on March 28, 1964. The camp grew. Buildings were put up and students came to join me. The chimps live in groups with a male leader, and the mothers were very good, loving, and protective. After 2 awful events, in 1975, students stopped living at the camp. In 1977, the Jane Goodall Institute was founded. In 1986, I began the program called Take Care to plant trees in Africa. In 1991, I started the first Roots and Shoots Club for kids to learn about animals and protecting them.
My name is Jacques Cousteau. I was born in 1910 in France. I had an older brother named Perry Antoine. Perry Antoine liked to be called Pac. Pac is my friend. When I was 10, we moved to New York City. And when I was 14, I did experiment by throwing rocks at 17 windows to see what forces can break windows and what cannot. This got me in big trouble. I saved money to buy a movie camera. I took it apart and then put it back together again. I did not like school. I got bad grades. I liked to make movies more than school. When I was done with school, I joined the Navy. I wanted to become a pilot, and I did. I took photos from the sky. One day, I was in a car when it crashed. My arms were badly twisted. The doctors wanted to cut my arms off, but I said no. In a few months, one of my arms healed, but the others stayed twisted for the rest of my life. The dream of becoming a pilot were over. The doctors said I should swim to feel better. One day, my friend Talus gave me snorkel fins and goggles. It changed my life forever. I saw things I never saw before. One day, I put my movie camera in a jar so I could take movies underwater. I took movies underwater, I made books of underwater life, and I won Academy Award for the best documentary. An engineer named Gagan made the Aqualung. The Aqualung helps us breathe underwater longer. It has an air tank, mask, and goggles. It is now called the Scuba. One day I dove 297 feet. My friend Marius dove 385 feet, and Fergus dove too deep and died. After this, I had to set the diving limit at 300 feet. Anything deeper was deadly. Someone gave me enough money to buy a boat. The boat is called the Calypso. It was turned into a research boat. and I added windows. It was perfect for filming. In 1951, I took my first expedition to the Red Sea. I also filmed sharks. I discovered new species of sea creatures. Water samples were collected at depths and were studied by scientists. I discovered a Greek shipwreck more than 2,000 years old. I found it off the coast of Marseille. I made a movie called The Silent World. It came out in 1956. I did 3 experiments when people lived underwater, and when people started to litter and throw garbage into the sea, I feared the meandering sea would be the first to die. In 1973, I made the Cousteau Society to help the oceans. I raised money and won a prize. I died in 1977, 2 weeks after my 87th birthday.
Hi, my name is Albert Einstein. I'm the world most famous physicist. Do you know why I'm so famous? It's because I got a Nobel Prize on 1921 when I was 32 years old. I found out what gravity was and why the sky is blue, and many more things. I was born on March 14th, 1879, on Ulm, Germany. That's 142 years ago. Let me introduce my parents. My father's name is Herman, and he is very nice and intelligent, but he was poor and couldn't go to college. He sold bids, but the company closed and we moved to a big city in Munich. He started a new company with my uncle Jacob. My mother's name is Pauline. She's the boss of our family. She came from a rich family and is very intelligent and plays the piano. I'm the first child. I have a little sister that's 2 years younger than me. I'm so smart, especially math and science, but I'm not good at talking. I didn't say my first word until I was 3 years old, and I wasn't good at talking until I was 10 years old. My parents worried about me and took me to lots of doctors, but none of them knew what was wrong with me. Even when I was an adult, I barely thought in words, but I was a very curious child. When I was 5 years old, my dad gave me a compass. If it always points north, I thought that was amazing. If I put it upside down, sideways, or if I go upside down, it always points north. I thought that was amazing. The curiosity helped me in the future discover what I found. I got married twice and have 2 children. I moved to America because the Nazis and the Hitler were getting very powerful, and I was Jewish and they hated me. They said that they would give $5,000 to the person who killed me, so it's dangerous for me to be in Germany. That's why I moved to America. I died when I was 76 years old. The end.
Okay. Hi, I am Neil Armstrong. I was born in Wapakoneta, Ohio on August 5th, 1930. I am most famous for being the first person on the moon. From the time I was a little boy, I was fascinated by airplanes and flying. In the 1930s, planes were still rare.
When I was only 6, I took my first plane ride in a plane called the Tin Goose. I enjoyed the ride every minute. I liked building model planes, reading airplane magazines, and drawing airplanes. But that wasn't enough. I really wanted to learn to fly. I took jobs to pay for flying lessons. At age 15, I earned my pilot's license. I like reading, science, and math. I attend Purdue University in Indiana on a Navy scholarship. I wanted to study aeronautic engineering. I served in the Navy. When I was stationed in Pensacola, Florida, I learned to fly small single-engine fighter planes. I was licensed Navy aviator. I was only 20 years old. In 1950, the Korean War broke out. I was sent to help South Korea fight the war against North Korea. On one mission, I was flying the Panther jet when the plane was shot by enemy gunfire. Luckily, I landed safely and I was unhurt except the cracked tailbone. After the war, I came back to Purdue to finish my studies. While at Purdue, I fell in love and married Janet Sheeran. Jen and I moved to California. I was starting a new job as an experimental test pilot at Edwards Air Force Base in the Mojave Desert. We also had our first son named Eric. 2 years later, we had a girl named Karen. Tragically, Karen had a brain tumor and died at age 2. A few months later, I decided to become an astronaut. In 1962, NASA recruited 9 astronauts. I was one of them. Our family moved to El Lago, Texas, near the NASA Space Center. I worked very hard throughout training programs and traveled different parts of the world to prepare for emergency situations. In 1966, I became the command pilot of Gemini 8. It was launched to test the first docking of 2 spacecraft in orbit. On July 16, 1966, I, the commander of Apollo 11, and my 2 crewmen were launched to the space capsule Columbia. 4 days later, I floated from Columbia in the landing module Eagle. 1.5 hours later, I landed on the moon. When I landed on the moon, I said, "That's one small step for man, one journey for mankind." I died on August 25, 2012.
My name is Amelia Mary Earhart, and I was born at my grandmother's house in Atchison, Kansas on July 24th, 1897. One day, my father had enough money to take us to the World Fair. When we were there, I saw a roller coaster. When we got back, I wanted to make my own, but I knew I couldn't do it alone. So me, my little sister Muriel, a friend, and our uncle built one from the top of the shed to the bottom. And when I tried it out, I slid right to the bottom just like I wanted. I did it. We had done it together. Later on, I dated someone named Sam Chapman, who asked me to marry him, but I said no because I knew he would want me to stay at home and have children and not have a job. So in 1920, I wanted to be a pilot. I took lessons with Netta Snook, another woman pilot. After less than a year after I started, I had a test to get my pilot's license. When I passed, I flew in air shows. At the time, most pilots were men, so a woman pilot attracted a lot of attention. I didn't like to be on display, but I worked in air shows to earn money, so I had to keep flying. In Then my friend and teacher, Netta Snook, got married, and just as I feared, she would now be a wife and a mother. So I needed a new teacher. So I teamed up with someone named Monty Montijo. Monty was a stunt flyer and taught me how to do loop-de-loops and twirls. Now I felt like setting a record. I wanted to see how high I could go, but I didn't tell anyone my plans. So I had an instrument put in my plane to measure how high above the ground I was. I knew if I went too high, I could pass out. Back then, the cockpits were open, so if I went too high, I could pass out. It took 2 attempts, but I did it. Although I loved flying, soon I found I could not support myself just by doing it. So, there were no big airlines back then, and people did not travel by planes in the night yet. In 1924, I temporarily gave up my dream, and I sold the Canary, my plane, the Canary, and used the money to buy a car. You might think I would buy a practical model like the Ford Model T, but instead I bought a yellow convertible, and I named it the Yellow Peril. In 1927, a man named Charles Lindbergh made news all over the world. He was the first person to cross the Atlantic, fly alone across the Atlantic Ocean. It took him more than 33 hours to fly from Long Island, New York to Paris. A woman named Amy Guest wanted to be the first woman to fly across the Atlantic Ocean. But she was not a pilot, so she would just be setting the record by being a passenger. Sadly, Amy's family did not want her. However, Amy's family did not want her to go. They thought it was too dangerous. So George Putnam had to find another woman, and this time he wanted a pilot. So he found me. But when I learned I was just a passenger, not the pilot. But I still did it. We took off on June 17th, and later when we finished our trip and we got to London, I was welcomed with parades and music. I was made an instant hero. When I went back to America, there were more parades, more entertainment, and more music. Later on, George Putnam became my manager. I made money by letting companies use my name to advertise their products. By 1929, I was the best-known female pilot in America. In 1930, I set 3 new speed records. And in 1931, February 7th, I married George Putnam. 1 year later, I became the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean. On June 21st, and then in 1938, I went on a solo flight around the world. I was searching for Howland Island, but I never made it. My last message to the Coast Guard was, "We are running north and south," as I frantically searched for Howland Island, but I never found it.
Hi, my name is Mary Temple Grandin, and I was born August 29th, 1947 in Boston, Massachusetts. I am the oldest of 4 kids with 2 sisters and 1 brother. Since I was a kid, people called me Temple, my middle name, to avoid confusion with another girl named Mary who worked for our family. I was a little different as a kid and did not speak until I was 4. Not much was known about autism back then, but doctors speculated I was autistic. As a child, I enjoyed being outside. As a teenager, I worked on my aunt's farm. I earned my bachelor's and master's degree, as well as a PhD. I helped make the way we raise and treat cows much more humane before we eat them by inventing new technologies for cattle. I believe animals have feelings. It's our responsibility to care for them. Me being autistic is what helped me understand how the animals felt and what scared the animals. Because I have a differently wired brain, I can relate to being scared of loud sounds and bright lights. I also have done a lot of work for the autistic community by helping citizens understand more about autism. I am now a professor at Colorado State.
My name is Tutankhamun, but my name was Tutankhamun when I was born. I was born around 1343 BC. My parents were fell on Menhotep IV. My mom was a Mantanic princess named Chia. My parents were brother and sister. I had a cleft palate, club left foot, and weak bones, which some fact was because of my parents' close DNA. I liked the board game called Senate, and I also liked to play the trumpet. I loved to go hunting for ostriches with my bow and arrow. My education only lasted from age 4 to 9. Scribes taught me subjects like reading, writing, math, music, geography, and astronomy. My dad died when I was 9 years old. That's when I changed my name. Since my dad died, I became Pharaoh. Child pharaohs are guided/mentored by co-officials close to them. My head mentor is named I. My advisors and I said I should divorce my father's decisions. I agreed, so I brought back the old religion. I moved the capital back to the Thebes. I restored the temples, images, and privileges of the old gods. By the time I was 10, I made my half-sister and Testamun. My crown had symbols of goddesses of Egypt, a vulture for Upper Egypt, and a cobra for Lower Egypt, showing I ruled all of Egypt. I also had a flail and a crook. Because of the heat, princes and princesses always wore light clothing, but my wife and I wore heavy jewelry. Even young children wore heavy jewelry. Many servants worked for me. Different kinds of servants did different jobs. Some servants bathed me and dressed me, and each day they brought me food. Sometimes I swam in the Nile River, but crocodiles lived in the river, so guards had to watch out for them. When I got older, I could ride a chariot, 2 horses, and take boat rides. One day I was hunting ostriches in my chariot, and I fell out of the chariot and broke my leg. Since I had weak bones, I had complications from my broken leg. Egyptians built huge stone pyramids as tombs for the rulers. We believed in the afterlife. We saw dying as a gateway to a never-ending life. We were born with everything we may need in the afterlife. Rulers and rich families were born statues of servants to wait on them in the afterlife. Before being placed in the tomb, the dead body is mummified. First, embalmers remove liver, lungs, stomach, and intestines. They heat them in each jars. A hooked instrument is used to pull the brain out of the head through the nose. They keep the heart in though because it's needed in the afterlife. Then the body was washed with wine and soaked in salty solution for 4 days to dry out. Next, the body is rubbed with oil in empty spaces where the organs were. And is filled with sawdust and rags. After 15 days of wrapping, 20 layers of lining bandages, and 2 large shrouds, the mummy is put into a coffin, or 2 or 3 nested coffins. Because of my complications from my broken leg, when I fell off my chair at age 19, I died. It was 1323 BC.
born Joan Ruth Bader on March 15th in 1933 in Brooklyn, New York. My father was a Jewish immigrant from Ukraine, and my mother's family were Jewish immigrants from Poland. One day I saw some boys jumping from garage roof to another garage roof. It looked fun, so I joined in, even though it was not considered ladylike. I liked the library and liked reading Nancy Drew mysteries and books on Amelia Earhart. When I was a kid on a trip to Pennsylvania, I spotted a hotel sign and it said, "No dogs or Jews allowed." This memory left a sting. In high school, my mom had cancer and I did not attend graduation. My mom died the day before. I went to Cornell University with money my mom had saved. The first time I thought about being a lawyer was in college. I met Marty Ginsburg at college. He was the first boy I ever knew who cared that I had a brain. In 1954, I graduated from college and married Marty a few days after. From then on, I was Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Marty went to the Army and I worked at a Social Security office. Our daughter Jane was born in 1955. Marty and I shared chores as equal partners. My Harvard Law School routine was I went to Harvard Law School in 1956, and my routine was 8:30 a.m., leave for school when the nanny comes, attend classes, and study all day. 4 p.m., return home for baby time, read to Jane and play with Jane. 7 p.m., put Jane to bed and hit the books. Marty diagnosed with cancer and he beat it and graduated from Harvard Law and took a job in New York City. I transferred to Columbia University in New York City. I graduated from law school in 1959 at the top of my class. More than 40 firms rejected my application. In 1963, Rutgers University in New Jersey hired me to teach law. My pay was less than the male teachers. I was pregnant again. In 1965, James was born. I signed up as a volunteer lawyer at the American Civil Liberties Union. The ACLU is a group that fights for citizens' basic rights. In addition to a full-time teaching, I now started to defend clients and go to court. In 1973, I was walking up the steps of the Supreme Court in Washington, D.C. I was going inside to argue my first case there. My voice wobbled a bit when I first addressed the justices. I told the court that women, not just men, were now breadwinners, and a woman's paycheck and benefits were just as important as a man's. I argued 6 historic cases before the Supreme Court and won 5. In 1980, President Carter appoints me as a judge on the U.S. Court of Appeals in Washington, D.C. In 1993, I was nominated by President Bill Clinton for the U.S. Supreme Court and sworn in on August 10th. On the first hour on the bench, I asked 17 questions. That's more than some judges asked in weeks. My white lace collar meant I agreed with the winning side. My black beaded bib collar meant I disagreed with the winning side. My gold dangling collar with beads meant I would announce the majority opinion. In 2013, I dissented to a case that made me a rock star overnight. I celebrated 25 years on court in 2018. At 85 years old, I was not ready to retire. I continued to serve until I died of cancer on September 18th, 2020.
I'm George Washington. I was the first president of the United States from 1789 to 1797, and I'm known as the father of our country. I led America to fight for freedom, and I helped create the United States. Before I was president, I was an important military leader. I was born in 1732 in Virginia on my family farm. My dad died when I was 11 years old. I helped take care of my family. I did a lot of farm work on a farm. When I was 18 years old, I had to go off to war. Britain was fighting France. I led many soldiers and fought bravely for Britain. In one of the battles, 4 bullets tore through my coat. I'm lucky they missed my body. We won the battle against France in 1763. This time I went to war again. This time I led the Americans, and thanks to my leadership, that helped the Americans win the war. This war was called the Revolutionary War. During the Revolutionary War, the Americans had little money to buy food and guns for the army. I had worked hard to get the supplies that my soldiers needed. This formed the United States and the new government. In 1787, I helped write the Constitution with a group of men, later known as the Founding Fathers. In the Constitution, it told how to pick a leader in the country's laws. In 1789, Americans had the first presidential election. People all over this new country looked up to me. They thought I was a war hero and a great leader. I was president for 2 4-year terms. During the 8 years I was president, I grew the United States. 3 more states became part of our nation. After I was president, I went back to Virginia to run my farm and spend time with my family. My home in Virginia is called Mount Vernon. There are many ways I am remembered. Have you ever seen me? These are only a few. My face is carved in Mount Rushmore. My picture is on the $1 bill and quarter. The nation's capital is named after me. There is a monument named after me in the nation's capital. Here are some fun facts about me. I was the only president that didn't live in the White House. When I became president, I lost all my teeth but one. I wore false teeth made of iron. I wore white powder on my hair to stay hip with the times. It was considered extremely fashionable. There was a legend about me. The legend is I chopped down my father's cherry tree. When my father asked me about it,
George, did you chop down my cherry tree?
I cannot tell a lie, Father. I cut down your cherry tree.
There's a bear. Hello, my name is Davy Crockett. I was born by the Nolichucky River in Greene County on August 17, 1786. My grandfather was named Davy Crockett too. He came to America with his family around 1725. My family and I reached Tennessee in 1776. My grandparents were killed in an Indian attack. When I was 10 years old, I hunted game to feed guests. When I was 13, a small school opened up near my home. After a few days of school, I wanted to explore the woods instead of going to school. I kept studying and I grew up. After a few more years, I was old enough to marry. In 1806, I married a woman called Polly. We had 3 kids called John, William, and a daughter also named Polly. Another war broke out in 1812, and my wife Polly fell sick and died when she was only 26. Now that Polly died, I had to marry another woman to keep my kids and not send them away. So I married Elizabeth, a widow, and we took care of both our kids. Elizabeth's kids were named George and Margaret. We had another son called Robert. When I went to my work, I wore plain, worn-out clothes. I found a ruffle on the street and pinned it to my clothes. I hired some men and we hunted for prey. I hunted a bear over 600 pounds. In the world of Tennessee, I helped shuck corn. I was a celebrity. I ran for Congress in 1833 and won. Politicians talked to me about running for president. I seemed to ignore the job. In Philadelphia, I was given a rifle. I named it Old Betsy. In 1835, I lost the election. In Texas, I liked hunting buffalo and called it the Texas Bear. In San Antonio, there was a welcome party for me. San Antonio was having a war against Santa Anna. Santa Anna's army was just 5 miles away. After 2 weeks of war, no defender died. After most of the fight, Mexicans and I were brought to Santa Anna. Santa Anna gave orders for us to be killed. After that, I died without complaint. My son Robert joined the Texas Army after my death. Years later, Elizabeth joined him. Elizabeth died in 1860. This is the timeline of Davy Crockett's life. The most important of the timeline is he was born in Limestone, Tennessee, and he claims to have killed 1 of 5 bears in one season. This is Davy Crockett. He was born in 1786 and he died in 1836. This is the diorama. This is my rifle called Old Betsy.
Hello, I am Alexander Graham Bell, and I am a famous inventor because I made the telephone. I was born on March 3, 1847 at Edinburgh, Scotland. When I was 15, I moved to London and read a lot of books and got smarter. Then I met Sir Charles Wheatstone and learned a speaking machine he invented. When I got home, my brother Millie and I made a speaking machine by ourselves and it spoke. My father made something called visible speech. Visible speech is a system for deaf people that allows them to talk. My father made this because he is a speech teacher. I learned visible speech and taught it to deaf children. In 1873, I became a teacher at Boston University. I met Mabel Hubbard, who is a deaf woman and my student. A few years later, we got married and had 2 daughters and 2 sons. One day, I saw the telegraph lines and thought, what if vibrations can travel through those wires and make sounds? So I did many experiments and I learned sound can travel by vibrations. Then I met Thomas Watson and he helped me build the telephone. My father-in-law, Mr. Hubbard, gave us money so we could invent the telephone. This is the first telephone I made and experimented with. When someone talks on one side of the cup, the sound vibrates and travels through the wire and creates sound on the other side of the cup. We showed the government our telephone and they gave me a patent that approved it as my invention on February 14, 1876. In 1877, I made a company called Bell Telephone Company and made lots of money. But I don't want to be a businessman. I am an inventor. So in 1880, I left the company and made more inventions like the odometer, the decibel, and the photofilm. And I became the owner of National Geographic magazine when my father-in-law, the owner, died. In 1887, I met Helen Keller and became her teacher and friend. I died on August 2, 1922, when I was 75 years old. I will explain the background. This is a picture of me, and these are my inventions. The telephone, the photophone, the odometer, and the decibel. This is a symbol of my telephone company. Thank you, and that is all.
Hi, my name is Harry Tubman. I was born around 1822, but no one knows exactly when the date was. As a child, I was known as Minty. My dad was a wood chopper, and my mom was a chef. In 1827, at 6 years old, I got my first jobs, checking the muskrat traps and babysitting. In 1834, I tried to stop another slave from getting punished and got hit in the head, which made me have sleeping spots, which made me have a big skull. In 1844, I met John Tubman and got married to him when I was about 25. The first time I tried to escape was with my brothers, but they got scared and turned back. 2 days later, I escaped alone. I first walked 90 miles to Pennsylvania, where I got my freedom, and then went to Philadelphia, where I worked as a maid. One day I heard that my niece Lisa and her children James and Amada were about to be sold, so I went back to save them. After I saved my niece and her children, I continued rescuing slaves using the Underground Railroad. In 1851, I came back to save my brothers, and in 1857, I saved my parents. I bought a house for my family in a bowl, New York, near 1860. The Civil War started on April 12, 1861. Northern states that wanted to end slavery formed the Union Army. Many enslaved people served the Union Army. The governor of Massachusetts, John A. Andrew, was an abolitionist. He knew that because of my work, I was very familiar with the terrain of the South, and so I was asked to help the Union troops there. I worked in the South and worked as a nurse, and I signed on Confederate soldiers. I also became commander or intelligence operations for the Union Army's Department of the South. As a nurse, I cured sicknesses like dysentery, which caused horrible stomach cramps, and most people who caught it died. There was one cure. It used water lilies in Queensville. One of my biggest successes was when I led about 150 Black Union Army soldiers to free about 700 slaves. I stopped my service for the war in 1865 because the Union Army succeeded in defeating the Confederate Army. After the Confederate Army was defeated, all enslaved people in Africa in America were given freedom. Unfortunately, after the war ended, Black people were not fully free because their rights were limited thanks to the laws called Black Codes. I turned my home in New York into a boarding house to provide food and shelter. Were limited thanks to the laws. For those in need, and soon met my second husband, Nelson Davis. In 1869, I got remarried to Nelson. In 1874, we adopted a daughter named Joy. In 1888, my husband, Nelson Davis, died. Sadly, I wasn't able to save my sister, Rachel. I died of a sickness called pneumonia in 1913 at about 92 years old.